Ah, look at them. Another case of mistaken identity. Another group of amateurs who thought they'd found easy prey. They saw you walking alone, moving in silence, keeping your distance from the pack. They whispered, pointed at your solitude, and made the fatal assumption that alone meant weak, that quiet meant defenseless. Oh, how wrong they were. How beautifully, catastrophically wrong. Because what they didn't realize, what their simple minds couldn't comprehend, was that you weren't alone by accident. You weren't quiet because you had nothing to say. You were the scout, the advance guard, the warning shot they should have recognized, but didn't. They thought they were hunting a lone wolf, thought they could surround you with their numbers and their noise. They approached with that smug confidence of people who've never truly been tested. They came with their little ambush, their coordinated attack, their group chat strategies, and their rehearsed confrontations. But when they made their move, when they finally revealed themselves and their intentions, something shifted in the air. The temperature dropped, the shadows lengthened, and suddenly they realized they weren't in an open field anymore. They were in a den, your den, and the eyes watching them from the darkness weren't yours alone. You see, they made the classic mistake of confusing solitude with isolation. They saw you walking without a visible crew and assumed you had no backup. They watched you move through the world independently and thought that meant you were unprotected. They counted your visible allies and came up with 0, so they moved in for what they thought would be an easy victory. But power doesn't always travel in packs, does it? Real strength doesn't need to announce itself with an entourage. The most dangerous predators hunt alone, not because they have to, but because they can. And when someone comes for them, when someone mistakes their solitude for vulnerability, that's when the real family emerges from the shadows. They came prepared for one, with just enough courage to confront what they thought was an easy target. They brought their little squad, their backup dancers, their emotional support group. They thought their numbers meant something, thought their coordination would overwhelm you, thought their group dynamic would break your individual resolve. Instead, they triggered something ancient, something that had been dormant but never dead. They awakened not just your defensive instincts, but your entire lineage of survival. Every lesson you'd learned in isolation, every skill you'd developed in silence, every alliance you'd forged in the darkness suddenly materialized around them like a closing trap. Let me explain something about dynasties that these amateurs never understood. A real dynasty doesn't need matching jackets or group photos. A true dynasty doesn't require daily meetings or constant validation. The strongest dynasties are invisible until they need to be seen, silent until they need to be heard, scattered until they need to converge. You've been building your dynasty in ways they couldn't track on social media. While they were collecting followers, you were collecting soldiers. While they were posting about loyalty, you were testing it in fire. While they were talking about having each other's backs, you were creating bonds that transcend words. Your dynasty consists of every battle you survived alone, every skill you mastered in silence, every connection you made without fanfare. It includes the mentors who taught you in shadow, the allies who move in different circles, the resources you accumulated without advertising. Your dynasty is composed of every version of yourself that survived what was meant to destroy you. When they came for you, they didn't just face the person standing in front of them. They faced every lesson you'd learned, every scar that made you stronger, every moment of suffering that forged you into something harder. They met the child who learned to fight alone, the teenager who discovered their own strength, the adult who stopped needing external validation. You could see it in their eyes, couldn't you? That moment when their confidence cracked, when their certainty wavered, when they realized they'd miscalculated catastrophically. They came expecting fear and found amusement. They came expecting pleading and found preparation. They came expecting weakness and found a fortress. The shift happened so fast, they're probably still trying to understand it. One moment, they were the hunters, coordinated and confident, moving in for what they thought was a guaranteed victory. The next moment, they were surrounded, not physically, but psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, surrounded by a presence they hadn't accounted for. It wasn't just that you didn't flinch when they revealed themselves. It wasn't just that you smiled when they thought you should panic. It was the way you welcomed them like a host greeting expected guests, like someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment to arrive. Finally, your energy said without words, "I was wondering when you'd make this mistake." Because you'd been preparing for this confrontation long before they even knew your name. You'd been training for this moment in every second of solitude, every moment of silence, every instance of standing alone against the world. Here's what they failed to understand about lone wolves. They're never truly alone. They carry an army inside them, a dynasty of cells forged in different battles. Every trauma that didn't break them became a general. Every betrayal that didn't destroy them became a strategist. Every loss that didn't end them became a warrior. When they came for you, they met all of these at once. They met the version of you that learned to fight without backup. They met the version that discovered how to be complete without external validation. They met the version that transformed pain into power, isolation into independence, rejection into reflection. But that's not all they met, is it? Because your dynasty extends beyond just your internal army. It includes every person who ever saw your true worth when others dismissed you. It includes the quiet supporters who move in shadows, the distant allies who watch from afar, the connections you've made through authenticity rather than networking. Your dynasty includes the ancestors whose strength runs in your blood, whether you know their names or not. It includes the future versions of yourself that you're becoming, the potential that terrifies those who want you to stay small. It includes the universal forces that seem to conspire in your favor when someone tries to destroy what you've built in integrity. Watch how quickly they backpedaled when they realized their mistake. Watch how their aggressive energy transformed into nervous laughter, how their confrontation became a conversation, how their attack became an awkward retreat. They came in formation and left in fragments, each one processing the magnitude of their miscalculation. Some of them probably tried to play it off, tried to pretend it was just a misunderstanding, just a joke, just a test. But you could see the fear behind their forced smiles, could feel the tremor in their attempted casual energy. They'd seen something in that moment that would haunt them, a depth of power they hadn't known existed. Others might have tried to switch sides immediately, suddenly wanting to be your friend, suddenly recognizing your value, suddenly understanding what they'd almost provoked. These opportunists, these fair-weather warriors who only respect strength after it's been demonstrated, after it's nearly destroyed them. But the smartest ones, the ones with any wisdom at all, simply withdrew in silence. They understood that they'd escaped something profound, that they'd been given a mercy they didn't deserve. They recognized that you could have destroyed them completely, but chose restraint. And that restraint was more terrifying than any aggression could have been. Let's examine their fundamental error more closely, because it's a mistake that many make when evaluating power. They equated visibility with strength, numbers with security, noise with authority. They thought that because you moved quietly, you moved weakly. They thought that because you stood alone, you stood vulnerable. This is the error of those who've never understood true power, who think strength needs to be displayed constantly to exist. They're the ones who travel in packs because they can't stand on their own. They're the ones who need constant validation because they have no internal foundation. They're the ones who mistake your choice to be alone for an inability to build connections. But you've learned something they haven't. Real power is like water, invisible until it needs to be seen, formless until it needs to strike. Real strength doesn't need to announce itself because it's felt in the atmosphere. Real dynasties don't need matching uniforms because they're connected by something deeper than appearances. They came for the lone wolf and walked into a den that exists across dimensions. They tried to isolate you and discovered you're connected to everything. They attempted to overwhelm you with numbers and learned that one person aligned with their purpose is more powerful than 1,000 moving in fear. What happened next is what always happens when someone attacks a true lone wolf. The multiplication effect. Word spread, not through you boasting, but through their own shocked whispers. The story traveled, growing with each telling, transforming from their failed ambush into your legendary response. Suddenly, people who'd been watching from the sidelines began to reveal themselves. Allies you didn't even know you had started checking in. Resources you didn't know were available began presenting themselves. The attack meant to diminish you became the catalyst for your expansion. This is the paradox of attacking someone who's built their strength in solitude. The attack itself reveals their true network. Every person who's ever been helped by you remembers. Every individual who's ever witnessed your integrity takes note. Every soul who's ever recognized your authenticity suddenly feels called to stand witness. The dynasty that emerged wasn't just your internal strength manifesting. It was every connection you'd made through genuine interaction. Every bridge you'd built through authentic expression. Every alliance formed through mutual respect rather than mutual benefit. Now watch what happens to them in the aftermath. Watch how they can't quite meet each other's eyes the same way. Watch how their group dynamic shifts, how doubt creeps into their supposed solidarity. They came as a unit and left as individuals, each processing their own version of what just occurred. Some of them will try to convince themselves it didn't happen the way it did. They'll revise the narrative, minimize the moment, pretend they weren't really trying. But late at night, when they're alone with their thoughts, they'll remember the exact moment they realized they'd made a terrible mistake. Others will become obsessed, unable to understand how their calculation could have been so wrong. They'll review every detail, trying to figure out where the power came from, how someone walking alone could suddenly command such presence. They'll lose sleep trying to decode what they witnessed. But a few, just a few, will learn the real lesson. They'll understand that they witnessed something profound about the nature of power, about the difference between chosen solitude and forced isolation. They'll realize they tried to hunt someone who'd already survived everything. Someone who transformed every wound into wisdom. Let's talk about how you built this, because they'll never understand the architecture of your strength. While they were building their crew through proximity, you were building your dynasty through principle. While they were collecting people, you were collecting experiences. While they were focused on horizontal expansion, you were going vertical, deep into yourself. Every night you spent alone wasn't loneliness, it was construction. Every moment of solitude wasn't isolation, it was fortification. Every instance of standing by yourself wasn't abandonment, it was training. You were building something they couldn't see because they've never built anything from within. Your dynasty includes every book that taught you what people couldn't. It includes every meditation that connected you to something greater. It includes every moment of reflection that revealed another layer of your power. Your dynasty is composed of every skill you developed when no one was watching. Every strength you discovered when no one was supporting. They thought they were jumping someone with no backup, but you back up yourself infinitely. Every version of you that ever existed stands ready. Every lesson you've ever learned remains available. Every strength you've ever discovered stays accessible. You're not one person. You're a multitude, a living dynasty of accumulated power. The most beautiful part is how the energy shifted permanently after their failed attempt. They didn't just fail to diminish you, they amplified you. They didn't just fail to isolate you, they revealed your connections. They didn't just fail to break you, they demonstrated your unbreakable nature to everyone watching. Now when you walk through spaces, there's a different recognition. People who witnessed or heard about the incident look at you differently, not with pity for being targeted, but with respect for how you handled it, not with concern for your isolation, but with awe at your self-sufficiency. The lone wolf narrative has transformed into something else entirely. You're not seen as alone anymore. You're seen as selective. You're not perceived as isolated. You're recognized as independent. You're not viewed as vulnerable. You're understood to be strategically positioned. Even those who weren't present can feel the shift. There's something in how you carry yourself now. Not arrogance, but authority. Not aggression, but assurance. You move like someone who's been tested and proven. Someone who's faced the pack and emerged. Not just victorious, but transformed. What they accidentally did was provide you with the perfect teaching moment. The ideal demonstration of everything you'd been cultivating in silence. They gave you the opportunity to show, not tell, what you'd built during all those solitary moments. They created the stage for your dynasty to reveal itself. Now others who walk alone look to you with understanding. Other lone wolves recognize the depth of what occurred. Others who choose solitude over false company see in you the validation of their path. You've become the proof that alone doesn't mean weak. That quiet doesn't mean powerless. But more importantly, you've demonstrated the difference between being alone and being a lone wolf. Being alone is circumstantial. Being a lone wolf is intentional. Being alone is about absence. Being a lone wolf is about presence. Being alone is about what you lack. Being a lone wolf is about what you contain. They thought they found someone alone and vulnerable. Instead, they discovered someone who had transformed solitude into strength. Someone who had converted isolation into independence. Someone who had turned being alone into being all one. Complete, whole, sufficient. The confrontation has passed, but its effects remain permanent. They can't unknow what they discovered. They can't unsee what was revealed. They can't return to their previous understanding of power, strength, or solitude. You've fundamentally altered their perception of what it means to stand alone. Some of them probably still gather in their groups, still find comfort in their numbers. But now there's a whisper of doubt. They wonder if their unity is strength or weakness, if their need for constant company is connection or dependence. You've planted a question in their minds that will grow over time. Meanwhile, you continue as before, but not the same. You're still the lone wolf, still choosing your solitude, still walking your path independently. But now there's a confirmed knowing, a tested assurance, a proven foundation. You've faced the pack and emerged not just intact, but enhanced. The dynasty that revealed itself doesn't disappear just because the threat has passed. It remains available, ready, waiting. Every element that emerged in that moment of need stays accessible. You're not walking alone. You're walking with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their true resources. Stories have a way of growing, don't they? What started as their failed ambush has transformed into something larger. Each retelling adds another layer, another dimension to what occurred, not through exaggeration, but through recognition of what actually happened beneath the surface. They came for one and met a dynasty. But what kind of dynasty? Not one of blood, necessarily. Not one of traditional alliances, but something more profound. A dynasty of accumulated strength, of integrated experiences, of transformed traumas. A dynasty that exists across time, pulling resources from past, present, and future. The mythology building around you isn't fabricated. It's finally catching up to what always existed. People are beginning to understand that some individuals carry entire worlds within them. Some souls have lived multiple lifetimes in one, have died and been reborn so many times that they've become their own ancestry. You've become the story that lone wolves tell each other, not as fantasy, but as possibility. You've become the example that proves solitude can be strength, that independence can be power, that choosing to walk alone doesn't mean walking weak. You've become the living proof that one person fully integrated and allied can be their own dynasty. Without saying a word, you've issued a warning to anyone else who might make the same mistake. The message is clear. Be very careful who you assume is vulnerable. Be very cautious about who you think is alone. Be extremely thoughtful before you attempt to ambush someone whose full story you don't know. The warning isn't aggressive or threatening. It's simply the natural consequence of what occurred. Like a sign that emerges after an event. Danger, deep water. Not a threat, but a fact. Not an aggression, but an awareness. Those who approach you now do so with a different understanding, a different respect. Some people need entourages to feel powerful. Some people need constant validation to feel worthy. Some people need visible backup to feel secure. But you've demonstrated something different. That true power is self-contained. That real worth is self-determined. That genuine security comes from within. The lone wolf they tried to jump turned out to be the guardian of their own realm. The isolated target they identified turned out to be the sovereign of their own nation. The vulnerable individual they thought they found turned out to be the emperor of their own empire, complete with invisible armies and intangible resources. What makes this even more powerful is how you've integrated the experience. You haven't let it inflate your ego or distort your path. You've simply added it to your collection of confirmations. Another proof of what you've always suspected, that your solitude is sacred, that your independence is intentional, that your alone time is actually all one time. You continue to walk your path, perhaps even more peacefully now. The need to prove anything has dissolved further. The concern about being misunderstood has evaporated more. The worry about being seen as weak has completely disappeared. You've been tested in the fire and emerged not just unburned, but refined. The dynasty that emerged doesn't need to remain visible. It returns to its various dimensions, its different forms, its multiple manifestations. But now you know it's there, and more importantly, they know it's there. The lone wolf keeps walking, but now everyone understands that lone doesn't mean alone, and wolf doesn't mean vulnerable. This integration is perhaps the most powerful part. You haven't become arrogant or aggressive. You haven't started traveling with a visible pack or making noise about your power. You've simply continued being exactly who you are. But now, with the confirmed knowledge that who you are is enough, more than enough, watch how this event continues to ripple outward, affecting people who weren't even present. Those who hear the story, third hand and fourth hand, through whispers and implications. The narrative spreads not as gossip, but as education. Not as drama, but as documentation of what's possible. Other lone wolves hear the story and stand a little taller. Others who choose solitude feel a little more validated. Others who've been told they need to conform, need to gather numbers, need to build visible armies, suddenly realize there's another way to be powerful. But it also affects those who operate in packs. Some begin to question whether their numbers represent strength or fear. Some start to wonder if their constant need for backup reveals power or weakness. Some begin to see that true strength might actually require the ability to stand alone. The failed ambush becomes a teaching story, a parable about miscalculation and misunderstanding. It becomes a cautionary tale about judging books by their covers, about assuming vulnerability based on visible circumstances, about attacking what you don't fully understand. The ultimate reversal is complete. They came to diminish you and amplified you instead. They came to expose your weakness and revealed your strength instead. They came to isolate you further and connected you to your dynasty instead. They came as predators and left as prey to their own assumptions. But you haven't changed your essential nature. You're still the lone wolf, still walking your solitary path, still choosing independence over false security. The difference is that now it's clear to everyone that your choice is exactly that. A choice, not a circumstance. You could have armies if you wanted them. You could have visible backup if you needed it. You could travel with an entourage if that served you. But you choose to walk alone because that's where your power is purest, where your purpose is clearest, where your path is truest. The dynasty that emerged when they attacked hasn't disappeared. It simply returned to its various forms, some internal, some external, some visible, some invisible, some in this dimension, some in others. But everyone who witnessed what happened knows it's there, ready to emerge again if needed.